which will change a bit pace. So the idea in this session and the next 45 minutes or so will be much more focused on participation and what we can learn from participants. Because in the end, I think many of you actually do want to participate, of course, in the Horizon program. Maybe you have participated, maybe you want to increase your success rates in the future. And I think what we can all agree on is that there are many ways of succeeding in Horizon, in the Horizon programs. There are probably also as many ways to fail. And of course, we would like you all to be as successful as possible. So that's why we offer our support services, but also what we see more and more is that what really counts is the actual experience of doing and running these programs, these projects. Because in the end, when we tell you something, it's sort of secondhand knowledge that we convey. But if you hear it from actual participants, what worked and also what didn't work, I think it's very valuable lessons that we can all learn. So I will do a quick introduction of the participants in this session, in this panel. But don't forget, please, to also submit your own questions. We'll try to be a bit more interactive in this second panel. We have more shorter discussions and questions. And so I'll be very happy to introduce any of your questions that you will send in the questions tab. So to the panel members that have joined me here, first of all, thank you for accepting and participating. I will be addressing a couple of questions to either all of you or individually. Try to stay somewhat concise, and please don't hesitate to focus not only on, I should say, the positive experiences that you had, but also the negative ones, so that we can all learn from these failures as well. So first off, let me do a quick round of introduction, and then we can jump to the questions. So first off, we have Dr. Sabine Kessler. Her background is she's a hydrologist by training. She's a research assistant and project manager at IBLA. So IBLA is a somewhat smaller research organization. They work on, IBLA stands for Institut für Biologische Landwirtschaft und Agriculture Luxembourg. So it's a competence center for research, and also they also provide consulting services in the fields of organic agriculture and organic viticulture. So welcome, Sabine. Second, we have Professor Dr. Pascal Bouvry. He's a computer scientist, a full professor at the University of Luxembourg, and also chargé de mission auprès du recteur for the HPC, the high performance computing part. He's also CEO of Lux Provide. So Lux Provide is hosting is the part of the Euro HPC joint undertaking. It's hosting the Meluxina supercomputer that by now probably we are all quite familiar with. So welcome to you as well. Third, we have Carla Jellema. She's a project manager at the city management of Differdange, of the city of Differdange in Luxembourg. She's a background in business and finance and management, with a particular focus on sustainability. And she's a project manager for the European project Fusili that we'll hear a bit more about in a second. And then finally, we have Dr. Tommaso Serchi. He's a toxicologist by training, works at the LIST, the Luxembourg Institute for Science and Technology. He has a background in medical biotechnology and does a lot of work on nanotechnology related safety and 3D models of 3D in vitro models for doing certain types of studies, and he's been involved in quite a number of Horizon 2020 projects. So welcome to you as well. Let's dive into the questions. I think the first question is a bit applying to all of you. and certainly also to the audience listening in. So please don't hesitate to share your experiences and not only questions in the chat as well. So my first question would be, when we hear about the funding background and ecosystem in Luxembourg, what would you say is making EU funding in particular different now from other types of funding, in particular, of course, the national funding, let's say the FNR that you could apply to in Luxembourg? And let's start maybe with Sabine, if you like. Thank you.
Yeah, for me, in comparison to projects on a national level, the size of the consortia is much bigger for EU projects than for national projects. So at the moment, we have one project with about 25 participants and farmers and institutes from maybe 15 different countries. So this is a lot of organization, or there's much more organization in EU projects than on a national level. And what's a bit tricky is the relation to EU-wide goals and regulations and strategies. So we have to be familiar with them to get these fundings. And yeah, the expenditure of time for preparation. It's when you have an FNR project, you have to spend a lot of time, but EU projects are more intensive than these projects.
Thank you. Carla, maybe you're less familiar with sort of the other types of funding or research funding in Luxembourg, but what is your impression? How are these EU projects different than, let's say, national projects?
I had written down one of the same points as Sabina actually did, that I was going to say that the consortiums in the EU are usually much bigger. So I would say with local funding, you have shorter lines and much smaller group of players where your project is going on. Sometimes it might even be a single player. So I would say the size is the main difference. But as you mentioned, I don't have a lot of experience with national level funding.
Tommaso, you've certainly been involved in a number of both national and European projects. What's your impression?
Yeah, for sure. What was already said is absolutely true. The size and the complexity of a project is definitely more in the European project. But as was said also in the previous session, FNR cannot cover all topics. So what the big advantage of the European projects is that you normally, if you look through the multiple programs that are available, you can always find something that fits your domain, even if it is not covered by the national priorities.
Thank you. Pascal, same to you. What is your thinking?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with the colleague saying that the scale is different. So it's usually much larger. You need to have at least 3 participating countries and so on. What also is important to highlight is the success rate. So if you apply for RDI project, being a company and being well prepared by Lux Innovation, chance it's extremely high. Going for EU is much more challenging. For the FNR bridges, is also like 50% success rate. EU project we took around 10, I suppose. So it's not the same game. Also, the administration is also complex because we are used to deal with the local administration, in my case, the university administration also, and so on. But all the partners have different ways of handling things. So that's a bit complex. In Luxembourg, I really appreciate usually the flexibility we have. Some of the other countries where we, for instance, universities that are hundreds of years old, they got time to pile up rules and regulations that does not ease up the international collaboration.
Thank you. Yeah, that is very interesting. I think one thing also that sets the European funding a bit apart in some regards is that, and this relates back to this multiplicity of actors that are involved in these large projects, is this more direct contact to sort of end users and different types of actors, involving different types of actors. when we take the case of IBLA and the projects that you're doing, you have a direct line with one such type of end user. These are the farmers that maybe most of us don't see necessarily as innovation drivers, but that play certainly a very important role if we speak about innovation in sustainability and green tech and farm to fork. So can Sabine, maybe you can tell us about how are you how do you use this connection that you have, this natural connection that you have to farmers to your advantage in new projects, and maybe what can other participants or future participants learn from this interaction?
Yeah, so we aim to have a direct transfer of the knowledge from the scientists to our consultants, to our farmers, and we use this for dissemination. So this is a big part of our dissemination concept in these projects. The farmers, they do not benefit from the projects in terms financially. So they get some kind of a expense allowance for the trials that we carry out on their fields. But they support us wherever they can. So they spend much more time than they become money for it, but they really benefit from the experience on their own fields. So new techniques, new research is directly tried out on their fields, and they know what the result can be if there's really a potential of the new techniques and new measures or not.
Thank you. I think that highlights a critical point that that at least we see it, that these European projects, they're not primarily only also for financial reasons. If we speak about farmers or end users of any other sort of type, it's about getting something out of it, and it's not necessarily a financial return that you get, because as we all know, you do have to put a lot of energy and time into these projects, but it's the knowledge and the experience that you can get out. Carla, if I can ask you, you're sort of a different type of non-classical, let's say, research actor in the ecosystem, but that nevertheless play a more and more important role. So the project you're currently running at Differdange is called Fusili, and maybe you can tell us a little bit very shortly about the project, what it is about, and how you involve end users as a city.
Thank you, Charles. Fusili is about urban food planning to make the food system more sustainable, to make it with shorter way and local. An example has been with the COVID crisis that people saw how important it is that not everything is imported, but that it is coming from the local sphere. And then, of course, there is the climate change as well, with like CO2 reduction. So it is important to become more self-sufficient. And since more and more people are going to be living in cities, it is important that food is produced in cities or around cities as well. And we are in a big European consortium with 34 partners, and there is 12 cities included. And the cities have the function, I would say they all will establish their own living lab, which will be testing beds in real life for new policies. One city will be practicing, for example, with aquaponics. Here in Differdange, we want to set up an agroecology project to produce more fruits and vegetables for our canteens in the Maison Relais. So every city has a different focus, with the idea that this can later on be replicated in other cities. And how we interact with the end users in our case, it is the citizens. We just did a citizen consultation by our local magazine, the monthly magazine that the city distributes. And there we asked people their opinion, which topics they found most important to get more knowledge about, and if they had already ideas how we could implement this. And at the moment we are working on to set up a call for participants for a food council, so that citizens can be included in the food council, but as well distributors, producers, that the whole food system is included in this food council, and so we can then make pilot projects with them in the living lab to see what is functioning and what we could afterwards keep on doing. Or maybe you say this was like a good pilot project, but unfortunately it didn't work out. But of course we go for all the pilot projects working out good.
Thank you. So you, I mean, would you, besides projects like this, where there's a certain logic to keeping short distances and integrating the whole value chain, do you see a prominent role for cities and public administration in general in European projects, also in other areas?
I think they are a good additional value. We don't have a lot of research centers in our consortium, but we have more universities in them. And I can see that the universities look at it much more from an academic point of view. And I think cities, companies, or other governmental organizations can be more like the practical implementation. So I for sure see a role there.
Yes, I think it's a very important element, and I think the Commission is stressing this throughout the whole program of Horizon Europe, even more than Horizon 2020 before, because in the end, it's not about making projects for making projects, and you know, at the end of the project, we file the report in a cabinet and we go on to make the next project, but we really want to reach citizens and as I said before, end users. And I think the only way that we can guarantee this is to have them involved, and have them involved very actively, and not sort of as an excuse to get funding by a large academic consortium, but really to have an active role. And I think the interest is there, and probably the challenge will be to identify and make these, you know, find the right partners. So staying on that topic, Tommaso, when we take more the perspective of a research organization, how do you reach out to end users? What is your strategy to involve them in projects and get in contact?
That's a good question. Honestly speaking, it's very difficult to involve end users. End users meaning everything, because you can think about public, you can think about industry, you can think about public bodies, international organizations. So end users is a term which encompasses a variety of different entities, and it is difficult. You need to offer them something. You need to find, for instance, cities like Differdange who are willing to do what needs to be done. We often need a demonstration site. We do need policymakers to support us in bringing up to a higher level our research. How do? We try to identify who is the best and most interested actor in what we are doing. Then we try to find a contact. So if I think about industry, I would probably, for my topic, try to contact the head of toxicology of the company, and then either through presentation, through a common contact, or if I don't find anyone, I simply send an email and see if I get an answer. And normally it works. The problem is then to get them engaged. The first contact is no problem, but then to go to the operative phase, it takes time, energies, and yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a key point that is still difficult to address to everybody, how to identify a good consortia and especially, you know, avoid falling into certain traps, avoid having to spend a lot of time and energy on a consortium or proposal that is probably not rightly set up from the beginning. So that's maybe a general question to all of you is what is your strategy? How do you find partners in general? How do you find good consortia, and maybe what are the warning signs that you have experienced or that you can think of? Is anybody a point on that?
Well, I have a mic on, so if you don't mind, I go on. I'm not sure, but it is really possible to draw a guideline on how to identify good and bad consortia. I had all kind of experiences with experienced consortia who failed miserably, and also recent, relatively not experienced consortia who succeeded. I have projects which are written in 1.5 years, and successful projects which are written in a week. So I would say the best thing to look is if a core team is experienced and knows what they're doing, then they can go over a lot of difficulties. So they can write faster, and it doesn't really mean that they need to be super structured. But if they know the business, that's for me is the most important thing.
Thank you. Anybody else wants to jump in?
Yeah, I might jump in. And one of the ideas that the EU programs are not coming from thin air. So they are coming from somewhere. Some people are writing them, and some people are involved. So it's really helpful somehow to find back and be able to work with the people already helping to write the program. So for the HPC world, for instance, university enlist joined a consortium called ETP for HPC. That is the industry consortium, and that is writing something called strategic research agenda. And this is used by the EU, for instance, to get inspiration on where to go, so that you can really have influence from the beginning. Using this lobby and consortium, you already find some partners in there. And as I mentioned, this is industry consortium, so it's very nice for public research really to bind with them. So that's one way to do it. Yeah, I agree with also Tommaso that there is some let's say dice rolling. Sometimes you can be winning, sometimes you can be losing, but I'm not sure that the dice are the same for everybody. So if you have big industry partners, can definitely help. If you have also the whole spectrum that is required, so you will see that there will be requirements to have these end users and so on. So you need to be sure that you have basically the right mix that is required by the code.
Anybody else, or maybe we move on? Sabina, maybe?
Yeah, so you tried how to identify consortia. So when I started at IBLA about 40 years ago, we only had 2 European projects. They are all dealing with grain legumes and cultivation. So grain legumes, soybeans, peas, or lupins. They were dealing with biodiversity, and for new proposals, we normally rely on this network of research institutes, of universities, or other end users or farmers who are interested in different topics. And moreover, we have a network of organic research institutes for organic agriculture, and we are organized in Feeble Europe. So it's an organization for all these research institutes, and sometimes we go together in those consortia. So we're not IBLA itself, but we are part of this Feeble Europe, and then we go together in these proposals. And for other consortia, we just wrote a description of IBLA and sent them to different possible leaders, project leaders, and just waited for an answer. So if you can join or jump into the project or not.
Okay, thank you. Maybe related to that, and again addressed to all of you, I think since 2 or 3 years, these type of brokerage events have become somewhat popular, where generally they are thematic by some thematic area, a cluster of the European Horizon program, for example. Have anybody of you participated in these sort of events, these brokerage events? Or do you have any experience? Do you see them as an advantage, or do you rather see them as sort of a last resort that doesn't really bring more than maybe some interesting contact or other? Do anybody has experience with those?
I have been to a couple of them, and to be honest, I find them of limited use, very limited use.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that is because probably the large or more well-known research actors, they have already come together before, and it's sort of they're just looking for focal additional partners?
That's one thing. The other thing is that at least from the two I was, the big actors, they're not the scientists going to these events. They are I don't know, the head of business development, but not the people involved in the call, the people who you need to talk to get on board of the project. So they go to do some lobbying, they go to see the European officer, they go to do other things. I don't find them useful for scientific contacts, to be honest.
Yeah, in my personal experience, I participated obviously in a different role in them, or at least in some of them, and I would say there is certainly a use for them for newcomers and for sort of non-classical participants. So for companies that have some sort of experience, yes, maybe. For an SME that maybe, or a startup that has no experience, it might be very difficult. But for all these complementary actors that have this end user access type of approach, I think there is some use to it, because they are traditionally not in these networks. And I've seen examples of people and consortia getting together in ways like this. I've also seen that something that we hear very often as sort of a criticism of the Horizon program, and there is some truth to it, that it's sort of a winners club, that it's always the same people that come together, and the big universities, etc. There's some truth to it. I don't think it's only due to the fact that it's the winners that stay winners. It certainly has to do with getting the secret sauce of what makes a good project, and building up the internal support structures to promote these type of activities. But then it's really also about just the networking part, and so for newcomers that can be difficult to first cross this line. But there is some hope to it. I wouldn't say it's completely hopeless, at least from our side. Okay, so maybe moving on. So do you see, maybe let's start with Sabine, do you see any sort of other factors that are limiting that can limit your participation in new projects? So obviously we heard about finding a good consortium, so that's one factor. Second, I would say certainly you need to find a call that's matching your interest. That's probably a given as well. But do you see any other sort of things that, from an administrative point of view, or simply from an operative point of view, that are limiting you as an organization to do more projects?
In the last years, it was simply the success rate, as Pascal already mentioned. So we worked on, I think, 3 proposals. We had some proposals for the European Marie Curie postdoc program, and we had a really good proposal with, they reached about 90% of the points that they need, and I think the threshold was about 80%. But so they were fundable, but the budget was already empty, so our project didn't receive funding, which was at the end very So it's a bit it's a pity that we cannot get these projects where we put so much time or spend so much time for. Thus, we learned to better invest our time in a few really good proposals where we convinced of, and to leave anything else to leave it away.
Anybody else wants to jump in on that? No problem. So next question, Tommaso, what would you say is an easy mistake to make in new projects, especially maybe as coming as a newcomer to the program?
For me, the most common mistake is to aim too large, too high. it is complicated. It requires a lot of time, investment, networking, time for writing. I read somewhere that the cost for coordination of one proposal, if you're a coordinator, is about 100K, something like that, which it is most probably true from my experience. And to be honest, if you don't learn the work, the chances are extremely reduced to be successful. So my advice would be to start slow, maybe find a mentor, someone who can teach you, find a few trusted contacts who might bring you one time, two times in the writing, and then you can grow. It takes years. For us, it took minimum 5 to 6 years before we could be independent and start writing ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, that I think it also reflects a bit this point that as a participant or a future participant, you really need to take your time to try and understand and come to speak to us and try to understand really what's the spirit behind it, the logic behind such a call. Because when you just read the title, it might sound like it's matching exactly the tool that you want to sell or the service that you're developing, or the research you're doing. But when you're missing sort of the context and the history, it can easily make you too excited and not see the big picture. And you might think, well, I can just do this entire project with my business partner. And that's certainly generally the scope of these European projects are much larger than that. So we generally recommend it. I can fully agree with what you said, and I think we generally recommend, really, especially for newcomers, to try really come to us and let's speak about this project and your ideas, to see how they are matching and what could be done. And as Stefano showed this morning in his slide, that it's really a whole process of going through from. And it can just start at the idea of maybe I should try and find funding in the European programs, up to the point where you actually submit a project. It takes quite a bit of time. And as you said, it's a steep learning curve sometimes. It depends on what type of participant you are, I think, as well, because obviously if you're a big research player, you play a different role than if you are just sort of have access to a certain type of service or end users. So maybe anybody else wants to jump in on what are easy mistakes or mistakes that you've done or tried to avoid?
Yeah, for me, an easy mistake at the beginning was to underestimate this importance of the soft skills section. So on those questions on interdisciplinarity, on gender equality, on diversity, open science, data management, and so on. And we focused at the beginning on excellence. And yeah, that was really a big mistake. And yeah, 50% of the proposal evaluation at the end is on this dissemination, communication, visibility. Of course, it was pointed out several times by the national contact point. So I've contacted you. I was sometimes at a workshop in Bonn in Germany for another workshop, and this is not always so easy for a scientist to have all this communication, dissemination, and impact issues in the proposals.
Yeah, I would agree. In my previous life, I was a researcher, and honestly, I've never learned any of these skills really, except through trial and error. And so it takes quite some time to acquire this. Some people are naturally good at it, but I think the good point is also there are a lot of good, how should I say, courses and books and whatnot on all these issues. But the first step, obviously, is, as you rightly said, is not to underestimate these parts. So maybe a more general question is, what kind of support, let's say, maybe internal or external, can be both, would each of you need or appreciate to become more successful in EU projects? I think there's certainly some things that we cannot control. We cannot control for the competition and other consortia that are forming. We sort of cannot really control for the fact that there might be this bias of big players that have long experience. But what are the things that we can change, but that sort of need some support?
For me, the most important thing is access to information. Especially in Luxembourg, we are a short value chain. So we have advantage of having you guys from Lux Innovation at ready hand. You always answer. We can go out for a coffee and chat, which is not the same in bigger countries. So I hear colleagues from I don't know, France. They often don't get any reply from their NCP simply because the NCP cannot handle all the requests. And so they miss important information that you can provide us, important feedbacks, proper representation at the program committee when it is needed. For me, that's the most important thing that we need. Then for writing and other things, I think we can handle them in a way.
Thank you, Tommaso. Anybody else who wants to chime in?
Yeah, internally at IBLA, it would be great to have one person, one employee who deals only or exclusively with those EU applications, but we're a small team of something 6 to 8 people in research and development, so that's really not possible. And it remains for us a little bit of a lottery game.
Okay, thank you. When we look at Pascal, when we look at the sort of projects that you have been involved in, these are at least the recent ones. Many of them are really large projects and complicated projects with many different partners involved, different types of partners. What can you describe maybe to the newcomers that might not be used to such large projects, what it is like to coordinate such large networks and what your experience is with that?
Yeah, so it's I would say very challenging. So I think that we need also at the level of the organization to have the right support. So currently I have some projects run by the SNT and some directly by the faculty. So we have a research facilitator team at the level of the faculty and project managers at the SNT level. So these kind of people are really essential for the new EU master for HPC, for instance. I have a dedicated person for the whole project lifetime working on that. Also, I think it was Tommaso mentioning that, yeah, we have different people and different skills working together. Researcher would like to focus on the research topic, and I think Sabine or Carla also mentioned something similar in their experience, so that people have different concerns. Usually for a researcher, first thing is contribution to science, writing papers, and so on. But EU projects ask for a very strict discipline in terms of the reporting, of the writing effort, and so on. So we really need a team to make that work. A single person cannot make it. So that's for me the key. For the question also related to some more early researchers and so on. I must say that I was kind of lucky because I was kind of born in a EU project. So when I started my PhD, it was already involved in some FP1 and FP2 kind of programs at that time. So being acquainted and just as a researcher to see a bit how this is working, I don't think that I would recommend to, I don't know, a young assistant professor just to go for 100, let's say, a partner consortium from the beginning, but really learn how this mechanic is working for this EU project, and after that also, as I mentioned, to have the right team and setup. Tommaso was mentioning it was taking some years to put that in place. I can tell you that level of University of Luxembourg was the same, and that's also reason of success. So we've in Luxembourg now excellent researchers, but also excellent research team, and in that context, Lux Innovation is also making a great work.
Thank you, Pascal. When we shift to, all these points are certainly very much true, even for young researchers or early career researchers. But maybe any of you have any sort of particular comments or tips, or as Sabine said before, skills that you should develop as a young researcher if you think about European projects. Maybe you don't want to start one immediately, and certainly don't think about coordinating a large consortium, but what are the skills that you can learn now or try to acquire now as a young researcher to sort of apply in the future in these projects? And, can anybody jump in here?
Patience. I mean it, because we look at the bright side. So we say, we succeed in 15% of the cases. Yeah, but it also means that we fail in 85%, which is by far much larger than 15. So for every success story that we have at least 8, 9, or 10 failures to bring up. So and I know, especially when we're young, we all used to be young once. We are all emotional, impatient. We want to succeed immediately, and there are exceptions. I know super young coordinators who had a brilliant idea, went for it, and won it. I mean, it is possible. But most of the time, you don't, because we have to learn how to do certain things, how to handle certain things. I don't think it is rocket science. Project writing and project management, it's definitely something that everybody can learn. One thing that we have to learn is there is the scientific part, then there is the implementation, and then especially when you coordinate, there is the expectation management. So you have to detach a little bit from what you have written and look at what you have promised, because at the end of the day, you sign a contract with the commission and they expect to be delivered not amazing science, but what you have promised. So even if you do more, but not what you promised, you will fail in their eyes. At the end of the day, it's an administrative process, and everything has to go in the right place. And these are the things that you think are irrelevant, and for me, probably the most important to learn.
Thank you, Tommaso. Anybody else wants to jump in? Otherwise, maybe let's continue with another question for Carla. What, as a city of Differdange, where would you say, and we mentioned a lot about the sustainability, where would you say would lie your future interests? What kind of topics or type of projects would interest you to participate in the future?
That's a good question. It would for sure keep on being in, like, I would say, the sustainability field as well. The city is very keen on sustainability, on seeing with their CO2 levels. So I would say this, like, it depends a bit, like, as well what comes up, because we as a city are not like starting the project. It's more that we become part of the consortium. So it could also be like a different field, as you say. We start looking more at like biodiversity, how to make the city greener, that the living conditions of the people getting improved. So yeah, I would say it's broad, because the city is like, it has a lot of different departments. As you mentioned, I'm part of city management, but I could see that our service écologique has a very different interest than I have, and we already signed the Klimabündnis, so I could see that they want to go more towards climate neutrality as well.
Okay, thank you. So we're almost at the finish line for this panel. I think for everybody's sake, to relax a bit, it might be best to stop here. Thank you all for participating. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Thank you for listening in. So the event is not over yet. There will be a break now, a lunch break, and the sessions will continue at 1:30. And there will be parallel sessions. So there will be 4 parallel sessions from 1:30 running to 2:30. Then there will be a second set of 4 parallel sessions, so you can select the ones that you like to listen to. And if there are more than one parallel that you're interested in, there will be recordings later, so you can still check them out. At 1:30, there will be 4 sessions. There will be one oriented more on starters. There will be one on the missions. There will be one on defense, and one on the digital transformation. And then in the second set, there's one for synergies in innovation, one for circular economy, one session that's more of a question and answer session for health, Marie Curie and ERC programs, and one on the space. So thank you again to all our speakers for participating, for sharing your insights. I think if we can draw some major conclusions, it's certainly to be prepared, to have sort of some sense of expecting the unexpected and expecting also failure, taking failure not necessarily too personal and stopping, but trying again, because that's the way that even the best participants do it. Come look for support, come to us, or try to look elsewhere. Certainly there are different ways of getting support and building up knowledge and experience. And as I said, there's quite a diversity of projects, there's a diversity of participants. So there are different ways of finding success. So thank you all again, and then we'll see each other in the afternoon, and hope you enjoyed this session. Thank you.